MMA system. I will be pound for pound GOAT. Chapter 31. A new morning. Damon woke up early, the sunlight peeking through the curtains and casting a warm glow over the room. He stretched his arms and yawned, feeling the softness of the bed beneath him. His body ached from the fights, but it was a good kind of pain, a reminder of his hard work and determination. He got out of bed and walked to the bathroom, his feet making soft creaking sounds on the floor. He turned on the light and looked in the mirror, wincing slightly at the sight of his battered face. His eyes were puffy, and his cheeks were bruised, but it didn't look too bad. He washed his face with warm water, feeling the coolness soothe his skin. After washing up, he dressed in the same clothes he had worn the day before. They were clean and comfortable, and he didn't see the need to change. He walked back to bed and looked at his mom, who was still sleeping peacefully. She was lying on her side, her hands tucked under her pillow, and a soft smile on her face. Damon felt like she might sleep the whole day, due to the comfortable bed and the warmth of the room. The room was quiet, except for the sound of his mom's gentle breathing. Damon sat down on his bed, looking around the room, taking in every detail. The walls were a pale yellow, and the furniture was old but clean. There was a small table in the corner, with 2 chairs, and a TV on a small table against the wall. The window had a view of the parking lot, and the sunlight cast a warm glow over everything. Damon opened his system interface. Total fights. 3-0 fighting style. Style. Muay Thai. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Physical stats. Strength. F speed. F stamina. F endurance. C+. He examined the TV, noticing how old it looked. The screen was dusty, and the buttons on the front were yellowed, but he decided to try and turn it on anyway. He pressed the button that looked like the power button, and waited. At first, nothing happened. But then, the screen flickered and turned gray. Suddenly, a loud, static noise filled the room. SHSHHSHSHSHSHSHSHSH. Damon cursed under his breath. Fuck. He quickly turned to check on his mom, worried that the noise would wake her up. But she was still fast asleep, undisturbed. Damon let out a sigh of relief and quickly turned off the TV, not wanting to risk waking her up. The room fell silent again, except for the sound of his mom's gentle breathing. Damon stood there for a moment, looking at the TV with a mixture of disappointment and frustration. He had hoped to find something to watch, something to take his mind off things. But the TV was clearly old and broken. But then, something inside Damon urged him to try again. He decided to press the button once more, and this time, the static noise grew even louder. He panicked, his heart racing, and quickly slapped the TV to try and make it stop. To his surprise, the static noise ceased, and the TV began playing a clear picture. Damon was shocked and relieved. He looked around the TV, searching for the volume switch, as the sound was still very loud. He finally found it and turned it down to a more comfortable level. As he looked at the screen, he saw that it was showing a horse racing match. Damon wasn't interested, so he started pressing buttons to change the channel. He searched for a long time, but couldn't find anything else. Just when he was about to give up, he stumbled upon a different channel. This time, he saw 2 fighters facing each other in a cage. Damon's eyes widened with interest. He noticed that it was a UFA match, and even though the TV was in black and white, it didn't bother him. He sat down, engrossed in the match, watching every move the fighters made. The sound of the crowd cheering, the commentators' voices, and the fighters' grunts filled the room. Damon was completely absorbed in the match, his eyes fixed on the screen. He watched as the fighters exchanged blows, their movements swift and precise. As the match ended, Damon felt a rush of excitement. He wanted to watch more. He kept watching, one match after another, fascinated by the skill and strength of the fighters. Chapter 32. The Championship Dream. As Damon continued to watch, he noticed the crowd's excitement growing. It seemed they were all waiting for the final match. When the previous fight ended, a well-dressed man in a stylish suit entered the scene. He stood confidently, and music played, signaling the arrival of the main attraction. A man emerged with his crew, and Damon couldn't help but notice his distinctive look. He had a strong jawline, high cheekbones, and medium to dark skin. His hair was black and closely cropped, revealing a clean-shaven face. His deep-set brown eyes seemed intense and focused, especially when he was in the ring. Although the black and white screen didn't show colors, Damon could sense the man's aura. He exuded strength, discipline, and the sharpness of a seasoned fighter. As the man approached the cage, Damon realized that this was the championship match everyone was waiting for. The man held a championship belt, and Damon's eyes widened with excitement. He had never seen a championship match before, and he couldn't wait to see the action unfold. When the man reached the cage, he stood there, his presence commanding attention. The crowd cheered, and the commentators' voices grew louder. Damon felt his heart racing with anticipation. He was about to witness something special, something that would leave a lasting impression. He leaned forward, his eyes fixed on the screen, ready to take in every moment of the championship match. Suddenly, music played, and the crowd erupted in cheers. Damon's eyes were fixed on the screen as the other fighter emerged. He watched as the fighter walked out, his pale skin a stark contrast to the dark surroundings. The fighter's body was marked with tattoos, each one telling a story of his journey. Damon's eyes widened as he took in the sight of the large gorilla tattoo on the fighter's chest. The gorilla wore a crown on its head and clutched a heart in its teeth. The fighter's hair was cropped short. The eyes seemed to gleam with a predatory focus, and Damon felt a shiver run down his spine. The fighter's jaw was strong, covered in a trimmed beard that framed his face, adding to the aura of raw, rugged strength. Joseph fell to the mat, his body crumpling instantly. Damon gasped, shocked by how fast it had all happened. The referee rushed in, waving to stop the fight. Colin raised his fists in victory, and the crowd's cheers echoed through the TV speakers, almost overwhelming the sound. Damon sat back, stunned. The fight had lasted only 15 seconds. It was over almost before it began, but the impact of those few seconds was unforgettable. As Colin celebrated, climbing the cage, Damon stared at the screen, awestruck. The image faded to black, but the excitement Damon felt stayed with him. The fight might have ended quickly, but the memory of it would last a lifetime. The roar of the crowd was almost deafening as the announcer's voice cut through the noise, filled with his signature dramatic flair. Ladies and gentlemen, after just 13 seconds of the very first round, we have a winner by knockout. And now, the new UFA featherweight champion of the world, the rebellious Colin Nacgyver. The crowd erupted into a deafening cheer as Colin Nacgyver, the newly crowned champion, held his belt high. Damon watched in awe, mesmerized by the dramatic finish and eager to see more from Colin. Damon's eyes were still fixed on the TV screen, even though the broadcast had ended. He was lost in thought. His mind consumed by the image of Colin Nacgyver holding the championship belt aloft. He could almost hear the roar of the crowd, feel the electric atmosphere of the arena. Damon's desire to become a champion burned brighter than ever. He wanted to experience that moment for himself, to have the belt wrapped around his waist, to hear the announcer declare him the winner. He thought about his own journey, his own struggles and sacrifices. He thought about the long hours of training, the sweat, the pain, the doubt. But most of all, he thought about the glory, the honor, the sense of achievement that came with being a champion. Damon's determination grew, his resolve strengthened. He knew that he had a long way to go, but he was ready for the challenges life would throw. He was ready to put in the work, to push himself to the limit, to do whatever it took to become a champion. The image of Colin Nacgyver's victory lingered in his mind, fueling his ambition, driving him forward. Damon knew that he could do it, that he could become a champion. And he was willing to do whatever it took to make it happen. Chapter 33. Aoife's efforts. 5 months went by, and Damon's life settled into a routine. He woke up every morning at 6 a.m. to the point it was a habit. The system had an alarm feature he had discovered. His mother lay asleep on the other single bed, her gentle snores filling the quiet room. Damon got out of bed, stretched his arms, and began his morning routine. He quickly dressed in his worn-out clothes and headed outside to start his training. The cool morning air hit him as he stepped out of the motel room. He took a deep breath, feeling invigorated, and began his run. Damon pounded the pavement, his feet echoing through the empty streets. Sweat dripped from his forehead as he ran, his muscles warming up for the intense training session ahead. After his run, he returned to the motel parking lot, where he had made it his makeshift training area. He began his martial arts drills, practicing his punches, kicks, and grappling moves. The sound of his heavy breathing and the thud of his feet on the ground filled the air. As the sun rose higher, Damon's training intensified. He sparred with an imaginary opponent, his movements swift and precise. He was a force to be reckoned with, his determination and hard work evident in every move. Meanwhile, His mother slept peacefully, unaware of her son's grueling training session outside. She had grown accustomed to Damon's early morning routine and slept soundly, trusting that he was safe and focused on his goals. As the morning wore on, Damon's training came to an end. He returned to the motel room, exhausted but satisfied with his progress. He showered, dressed, and prepared his breakfast, his eyes fixed on the TV as he watched UFA fights, analyzing the fighters, techniques and strategies. Damon's fascination with the sport grew with each passing day. He became a fan of Colin McIver, admiring his confidence and skill in the octagon. He knew that one day, he would face the best fighters in the world, and he was determined to be ready. Damon's fascination with the UFA grew as he watched fight after fight. Her son, Damon, was the one bringing home the money, fighting in those brutal backyard brawls. She hated the thought of it, hated that he had to put himself in harm's way. She remembered the day he dropped out of school, the day they fled their old life. She had stolen his childhood, forced him to grow up too quickly. Now, at 19, he was fighting for their survival. The guilt was crushing her. Aoife's mind wandered to Damon's fights, the ones he had been having for months now. She didn't know what drove him to keep going back, what made him think it was worth it. She saw the physical toll it took on him, the bruises, the cuts, the scars. But she also saw the determination in his eyes, the fire that burned within him. She didn't understand it, but she knew she couldn't stop him. He was an adult now, making his own decisions. All she could do was be there for him, support him, and hope that he wouldn't get hurt too badly. The thought of losing him, of something happening to him, was unbearable. Aoife felt a mix of emotions, but she knew one thing: she wouldn't stand in Damon's way. She would let him chase his dream, no matter how dangerous, no matter how difficult. She would be his rock, his support, and his safe haven. And as she watched him train, she knew that she would always be there for him, no matter what. 4 months ago, Aoife had asked the motel owner for a job. She had to beg and beg until she finally got it. The owner agreed to give her a job, but instead of paying her money, she would get free rent. This was a big help for Aoife and Damon. Before, they were a homeless family, living on the streets and struggling to get by. But now, with the free rent, they were able to stay in the motel room. It was still very hard for them, and they didn't have much money, but it was a little better than before. Damon's fighting was bringing in some money, and with the free rent, they were able to save some of it. This improved their living situation a bit. They were still very poor, but they had a roof over their heads and some food to eat. Aoife was grateful for the job and the free rent. She was happy to be able to help her son and make their lives a little better. She worked hard at her job, cleaning the rooms and doing her best to make sure everything was perfect. Chapter 34. Bad news. Damon stood in front of the bathroom mirror, catching his breath after his morning exercise routine. He had just returned from his run outside and was admiring the changes in his body. Although he was still skinny, his physique now looked healthy and strong, unlike before when he appeared frail and weak. The improvements in his diet had made a significant difference. Since his mother had taken over the rent payments, Damon had used some of the money to buy nutritious food. He couldn't use the system's coins to purchase food because most of it required cooking, and their motel room didn't have a stove. So, he stuck to buying food with real money. The healthy food had added some much-needed fat and muscle to his body, slowly restoring him to a healthy state. His height remained the same at 6 feet 2 inches, but his overall appearance had changed for the better. Damon wasn't the only one benefiting from the better food. His mother had also become healthier, looking younger and more vibrant than before. Her skin had fewer acne scars, and her eyes sparkled with renewed energy. The motel room, once a symbol of their struggles, now felt like a home. Damon's mother had made an effort to make the space cozy. Despite the lack of decorative furniture, it felt like home. As Damon continued to gaze at his reflection, he felt a sense of pride and accomplishment. He had come a long way since his days of struggling to survive. His body was stronger, his mind was clearer, and his future looked brighter. Damon moved away from the mirror and began to undress. He took a refreshing shower, feeling the warm water wash away the sweat from his morning exercise. As they entered the house, Damon and Joey settled into the comfortable sofa, sinking into the cushions. They began chatting, their conversation flowing easily, like a well-rehearsed dance. For the past 5 months, they had grown closer, bonding over their shared passion for fighting. Their discussions often centered around the latest news in the UFA, analyzing fights, and debating the skills of various fighters. They delved into the technical aspects of the sport, discussing strategies, techniques, and training methods. Joey's eyes sparkled with excitement as he shared his insights, his hands gesturing animatedly. They walked out to the backyard, the place where the fights usually happened. Damon looked around, taking in the makeshift arena. He noticed the cage that marked the fighting area, and the chairs where the spectators sat. As he looked around, he couldn't shake off the feeling that something wasn't right. It was like someone was about to tell him some terrible news. He felt a knot in his stomach, a sense of unease that he couldn't explain. The backyard was quiet. The sun was shining, casting a warm glow over the area. But despite the peaceful atmosphere, it felt like it would end. He looked at Joey, who was standing next to him, and wondered if he knew something that he didn't. Joey's expression was serious, his eyes fixed on the ground. Joey spoke, his voice filled with nostalgia. "This place has so many memories." Damon nodded in agreement. "Yeah, it does." He looked around the backyard, remembering all the fights he had in there. Joey looked at Damon, his expression serious, and said, "My brother got the call from the UFA." Damon's face lit up with a smile. "Whoa, that's great news, man. I thought you were telling me bad news, but this is amazing." But as he looked at Joey, he noticed that his friend's face wasn't changing to a smile. Joey's expression remained serious, and Damon felt a sense of unease creeping back in. He thought to himself, "Wait, why isn't Joey happy about this?" And then Joey dropped the bombshell, "I'm closing up the fights, Damon." Damon's smile froze, and he felt like he had been punched in the gut. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. Chapter 35. Maybe not so bad after all. Damon felt like he had been punched in the gut, the news hitting him harder than any blow he had taken in the fights. He looked at Joey, his jaw dropped in shock. What do you mean you're closing the fights?" he asked, needing a clear answer. Joey looked down, avoiding eye contact with his friend. "I mean, I won't be hosting any fights," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Damon didn't respond, silence filling the air as he processed the information. He glanced at the cage, the familiar sight now feeling foreign. He slowly got up and walked over to the door, sitting down on the floor beside it. Damon's eyes were fixed on the ground, his mind racing with thoughts. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. Damon's gaze remained fixed on the ground, his thoughts consumed by the news. He couldn't imagine a life without the fights, without the rush of adrenaline, the money. Where else would he find fights? Joey spoke up. "Damon, but Damon cut him off, his voice firm. "Why are you closing the fights? I mean, I get your brother got the call from the UFA, but why close the fights?" He looked at Joey, his eyes searching for answers. Joey sighed, his shoulders slumping slightly. "Because I'm leaving Stockton, I'm going to LA. He moved closer to Damon, sitting down beside him on the grass. Damon's eyes narrowed, his mind racing with questions. "What about the fights here? You're just going to leave?" Joey nodded. "Yeah, I am. My brother's UFA opportunity is a big deal, and I need to be there to support him. Plus, LA has good opportunities for me too, so I can continue studying." Joey's face turned serious, his eyes narrowing slightly. "But Damon, don't take this lightly," he said, his voice firm. "My brother says the fighters there, although amateurs, are beasts. They're hungry, all of them have the same goal, beat their opponents and join the UFA." Damon nodded, his smile fading. He knew it was true. He wasn't going to fight against drunk people or people who didn't know how to fight. His opponents probably had gyms and training camps, things he didn't have. So he had to make sure he was at his best. He thought about his own training, his runs through the streets, his workouts in the parking lot. He thought about his diet, his sleep schedule. He knew he had to step up his game if he wanted to compete with these fighters. Joey's serious expression lingered, his eyes locked on Damon's. "You need to be prepared, Damon. This is a big opportunity, but it's also a big risk. You need to be ready." Damon nodded again, his mind racing with thoughts of training and preparation. He knew Joey was right. He had to be ready. "Also, I got this for you," Joey said, pulling out a small, worn cell phone from his pocket. "It's not new, but you'll need it to stay in touch with them." The phone's cracked screen and outdated design made it clear it had seen better days, but Joey assured him it still worked reliably. Damon took the phone, feeling a mix of gratitude and embarrassment. "Man, now I'm feeling like a charity case, with all these things you're giving me," he said, smiling wryly. Joey laughed, standing up from the grass. "Don't get too cocky, Damon. The phone is just an old one my brother used to use. It's been replaced, so I figured you could put it to good use." Damon chuckled, standing up as well. "Thanks, man, I really appreciate it." He looked at the phone, feeling grateful for Joey's kindness and generosity. "Well, I should go tell my mom about this," Damon said, putting the phone in his pocket. "I was planning to take her shopping for some new clothes for us. We could both use an update." Joey nodded, smiling. "Yeah, go tell her. She'll be thrilled to hear the news. And don't forget to call me when you get a chance, so we can catch up." Damon nodded, already walking away. "Will do, man. Thanks again for everything." He waved goodbye, feeling a sense of hope and excitement for the future. Chapter 36. Recommended. In a large conference room, a group of men sat around a long, polished table, engaged in a heated discussion. Only one woman was present, taking notes and occasionally glancing up at the speakers. The atmosphere was tense, with everyone focused on the topic at hand. Suddenly, a man in a black suit stood up, his presence commanding attention. "Okay, I have something to announce," he said, his voice firm and authoritative. The room fell silent, with all eyes on the man. He nodded, surveying the room before continuing. "Okay, the event was supposed to have 15 matches, but we've decided to add one more." The man in the black suit paused, letting the news sink in. He scanned the room again, his eyes locking onto each person, before nodding and sitting back down. A man across from Victor suddenly spoke up, his voice firm and demanding. "Victor, who are the matchups?" Victor, anticipating a reaction, pulled out papers from a folder and began distributing them to each member. He sighed, knowing what was coming. As expected, the man across from him slammed his fist on the table. "Oh no, hell no, Victor. Are you trying to ruin the event? This kid doesn't even have a fighting record, let alone a team or a gym, and you're trying to add him to this event." The other members nodded in agreement, their faces filled with disapproval. Victor sighed, expecting this reaction. "I understand your concerns," Victor began, "but I have reasons for this decision. First of all, this kid was recommended by the Titan." The man across from him mumbled, "Jake Morales." Victor nodded. "Yes. Now, while that may not mean anything to all of you, you should understand how Jake was discovered. He had no gym, no legal record of fights. But look what a monster he is. While this kid he recommended might not be the same, I don't see why we shouldn't try." The room fell silent, with all eyes on Victor. The members looked at each other, seemingly unsure of what to say next. The tension in the room was palpable, with everyone waiting for someone to speak up. In the meantime, he could still gain experience and hone his skills by participating in amateur fights. Damon stood in the parking lot of the motel, sweat dripping down his face as he caught his breath from his intense workout. The scorching sun beat down on him, but he didn't notice, still focused on his training. Suddenly, his phone rang, breaking the silence. He pulled it out of his pocket, looking at the number on the screen. It was an unknown number, but he answered anyway, pressing the small button. "Hello," he said, his voice firm. A voice came from the phone. "Good morning, is this Mr. Cross?" Damon nodded, forgetting he was on the phone. "I mean, yes, this is Damon Cross. How may I help?" The voice on the phone continued, "Mr. Cross, I'm calling from the event Battle Extreme. We need you to come to the medical center in 2 days' time to get a medical clearance before your fight." Damon listened intently, his smile growing wider with each passing second. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. He was finally going to get his chance to fight. "Okay, got it," Damon said, trying to contain his excitement. "I'll be there in 2 days." The voice on the phone confirmed, "Great, Mr. Cross. We'll see you then." Damon hung up the phone, his heart racing with excitement. He couldn't wait to get to the medical center and start preparing for his fight. He felt a sense of pride and accomplishment, knowing he had made it to this point. Chapter 37. Medical examination. Damon sat on the soft chair, his hand sliding down his face as he let out a deep sigh. He didn't like the smell of medicine that filled the air, or whatever it was that this place smelled like. He was currently in the medical center, surrounded by other fighters, all waiting for their turn to get their medical examination. Damon had been waiting for almost a day, and he wasn't alone. Others had arrived after him, and the line seemed to be moving at a slow pace. The fluorescent lights above flickered, casting a hum of electricity through the air. The sound of murmured conversations and rustling papers filled the room, creating a sense of monotony. Damon's eyes wandered around the room, taking in the sights and sounds. He noticed the other fighters, some looking focused, others looking anxious. He saw the medical staff, moving efficiently, taking notes and checking vitals. Damon's gaze fell on the clock on the wall, the hands ticking away slowly. He had been waiting for what felt like an eternity. He shifted in his seat, feeling the soft cushion beneath him. His hand drummed a slow rhythm on his thigh, a sign of his growing impatience. He stood up, stretching his arms above his head, trying to shake off the feeling of restlessness. He walked over to the water cooler, pouring himself a cup of cool water. The liquid refreshed his parched throat, and he felt a slight sense of relief. As he poured another cup of water and drank, the door to the examination room opened, and a very muscular man walked out. His physique was imposing, with thick, prominent veins and a slightly crooked nose, as if it had been broken before. One of the fighters sitting down couldn't help but stare at him, and whispered to the others, "Guess he's not passing the exam." The whisper was quiet, but due to the silence in the room, it sounded like regular talking. The others chuckled and snickered, but when the large man looked at them, they quickly went quiet. He walked over to the chair she had indicated and sat down, trying to make himself comfortable. The chair was soft and cushioned, and he felt a little more at ease. The woman, who he assumed was the doctor, smiled at him and began to ask her questions. "Can you please tell me about your medical history, Mr. Cross?" she asked, her pen poised over her notebook. He took a deep breath and began to answer, telling her about his past injuries and illnesses. He spoke clearly and concisely, trying to remember every detail. As he spoke, he couldn't help but notice the machines in the room. There was a large machine that looked like an MRI scanner, and a smaller one that looked like a blood pressure monitor. He wondered what they would be used for during the exam. The doctor listened attentively, nodding her head and making notes on her pad. When he finished speaking, she smiled and said, "Thank you, Mr. Cross. Now, let's begin the exam." He answered honestly, not hiding the fact that he had once been malnourished. He told her about his past struggles with food, and how he had often gone hungry. He spoke clearly and concisely, trying to remember every detail. Once they finished the questioning, they moved on to the machines. They went through different scans and tests, and Damon couldn't see a change in expression from the doctor. This made him nervous, because if she was smiling, he could have thought the test results were good, but if she frowned, the test results were bad. But there were no reactions, and because of that, he didn't know what to think. They did a series of tests, each one designed to measure a different aspect of his health. They took his blood pressure and checked his heart rate. They did a blood test and an EKG. Damon didn't know what to expect, but he tried to stay calm. When they were done with the physical tests, they sat down again. The doctor looked at him and finally smiled. "Okay, everything looks good on your physical condition," she said. "We'll go ahead and do the blood tests and EKGs, and you'll get your results next week, if not earlier." Damon felt a wave of relief wash over him. He stood up and shook the doctor's hand. "Thank you," he said, smiling back at her. He felt a sense of gratitude towards her, for being so professional, and for helping him. As he left the examination room, he felt a sense of hope. He hoped that his test results would be good, and that he would be able to move on with his life. He hoped that he would be able to achieve his goals, and live a healthy and happy life. Chapter 38. Fight Day. Damon woke up with a smile on his face. Today was the day he had been waiting for. Fight Day. It had been 2 weeks since the examination, and he had received his results, all clean and good. He felt of excitement as he threw off the covers and got out of bed. He stretched his arms and legs, feeling the familiar ache in his muscles. He had been training hard for this moment, and he was ready. He walked to the window and looked out, seeing the bright sunlight and feeling the cool breeze on his face. Today was the day he would step into the cage and show the world what he was capable of. He didn't know who his opponent was, but he didn't care. He was just grateful for the chance to fight. He couldn't help but think about the past week. He had been dreaming about this fight every night, imagining himself winning and feeling the rush of adrenaline. He had been training harder than ever, pushing himself to his limits and beyond. He understood that because he had gotten a chance to fight due to someone's recommendation, he might be treated as less important, but he didn't care about that. All he cared about was getting in the ring and showing himself to the world. He looked behind, staring at the well-made single bed not far away from his, and noticed that it was empty. It seemed his mother had already gotten up. He went to the bathroom, taking a refreshing bath and putting on some clothes. Coming out, he went under his bed and pulled out a plastic container. This was the container that held his mouthguard and MMA gloves. As he stepped out of the motel room, he took a deep breath, feeling the cool morning air fill his lungs. He looked around, taking in the familiar sights of the parking lot. His eyes landed on his mother, who was standing outside, taking a break from cleaning. "Mom, good morning," he said, smiling as he walked towards her. Aoife looked at her son, her eyes shining with a mix of excitement and concern. She already knew where he was going, and she had been worried sick about him all week. The room was full of sound of the soft murmur of fighters preparing for their bouts. He took his place among them, his focus solely on the fight ahead. Fighters began to enter the locker room, their faces set with determination. It seemed they were waiting for something, their eyes fixed on the door. The locker room door opened, and a man in a suit walked in. His slick black hair was perfectly styled, his trimmed beard framing his jawline. He looked at everyone, his eyes scanning the room as he checked the paper in his hand, flipping through the pages. "Okay, it seems everyone is here," he said, his voice firm and authoritative. "You can all go to your teams and wait for your name to be called, so you can go weigh in." As he spoke, his gaze swept the room, his eyes lingering on each fighter. Then, his gaze stayed on Damon for some time, his expression unreadable. Damon felt a shiver run down his spine as the man's eyes seemed to bore into him. Finally, the man turned and left the locker room, the door closing behind him. The fighters began to move, their movements swift and purposeful. They filed out of the locker room, heading to the personal rooms given to them. As the man in the suit finished speaking, he turned to leave, his eyes lingering on Damon for a moment before exiting the locker room. The door closed behind him, and the fighters began to stir, their movements swift and purposeful. "Wow, is that Victor Steele?" a fighter whispered, his voice barely audible. "Stop glazing on a man, and go prepare, dude." The whispers spread like wildfire, fighters nodding and glancing at each other in awe. Damon watched, his curiosity piqued. Who was Victor Steele, and why was his presence so significant? As the fighters filed out of the locker room, they headed to their personal rooms, assigned to them for the duration of the event. The rooms were small, with a single chair, a bench, and a mirror. Damon entered his room, taking a deep breath as he closed the door behind him. The room was quiet, that didn't even have air conditioning. Damon sat down on the bench, his eyes fixed on the mirror. He stood up, pacing back and forth in the small room. As he paced, he heard the muffled sounds of fighters talking, laughing, and preparing for their own battles. He didn't have a team or coach, but that didn't matter to him now. Chapter 39. Weigh-in. Damon sat in the locker room, his eyes fixed on the mirror as he mentally prepared himself for the weigh-in. Suddenly, a knock came from the door, breaking the silence. He stood up, thinking it was his turn to go out and weigh in. He walked to the door, his heart beating slightly faster with anticipation. As he opened the door, he expected to see one of the event staff or a fellow fighter. But instead, he saw a guy he had never seen before, carrying a large box in his hands. The box was about the size of a big suitcase, but not too big to be carried by one person. The guy looked at him with a neutral expression. "Mr. Cross, I have this from Mr. Steele," he said, his voice firm but polite. Damon was confused. Who was Mr. Steele, and what was in the box? But unconsciously, he stretched out his hand, taking the box from the guy. It was heavier than he expected, but he managed to hold it steady. "Thanks," Damon said, unsure of what to say. The guy nodded and turned around, closing the door behind him. Damon was left standing there, holding the box and wondering what was going on. He turned around, placing the box on the table in front of him. The box was a typical cardboard box, with a simple lid on top. Damon sat down on the bench, his eyes fixed on the box. He was curious about what was inside, but he didn't want to open it yet. He wanted to wait until he had a better idea of what was going on. As he sat there, he heard the muffled sounds of fighters talking and laughing outside the locker room. He felt a sense of isolation, sitting there alone with the mysterious box. Damon's eyes widened as he realized who Mr. Steele was, the guy who came in earlier to tell them about the weigh-ins. He remembered thinking that Mr. Steele looked like a rich guy, with his fancy suit and confident demeanor. Damon stood up, feeling a sense of curiosity. If Mr. Steele had sent him a box, then everyone else must have gotten one too. He wasn't special, so why did he get a box? He walked over to the box, ripping off the packing tape with a loud tearing sound. As he opened the box, he saw that it was filled with fabric. He reached in and pulled out a pair of shorts, MMA shorts, to be exact. They were black in color, and looked like they were made of a comfortable, stretchy material. He felt embarrassed, his face growing hot with discomfort. He remembered watching a weigh-in on TV once, where the fighters had worn underwear, even the women. But it was different when you were the one doing it. He tapped the guy who was leading him on the shoulder. "Hey, is it fine being in my underwear?" he asked, trying to sound casual. The guy chuckled a bit. "It's cool, don't sweat it. Just don't wear anything that can mess with the weigh-in. Heck, you can even go in naked if you want." Damon sighed in relief, feeling a weight lift off his shoulders. He didn't need to worry about what he was wearing. They arrived at a door, and the guy stood waiting. Damon waited too, his heart beating slightly faster with anticipation. Then, a knock came from the door. It was a gentle tap, but it echoed through the hallway. The guy turned to him and nodded. "It's time," he said, his voice firm but friendly. Damon opened the door and stepped into a hall with seats. The room was mostly empty, with only a few people scattered about. He scanned the space, his eyes landing on a platform at the front of the room. Everyone's gaze was fixed on him, and he felt a surge of nervousness. He made his way up to the platform, his footsteps echoing off the walls. A man in a black shirt stood waiting, pointing towards the scale. Damon stepped onto the cold surface, feeling a slight chill run through his feet. The man in black began to adjust the scale, his movements swift and precise. Damon waited, his eyes fixed on the man's hands as he worked. Finally, the man turned to face him, a microphone in hand. 125, he announced, his voice clear and loud. Damon's gaze followed the man's to the empty seats, where a camera was set up. He realized they must be live streaming the weigh-in on social media. The man's voice echoed through the hall once more. 125 for Damon Cross, he makes weight. He looked around the room, taking in the scattered faces. He wasn't sure he was comfortable with this level of public scrutiny, but it was done now. With a quiet sense of satisfaction, Damon turned and walked back the way he came, leaving the platform and the staring eyes behind. Chapter 40. The weight of expectation. The day wore on, with fighters continuing their weigh-ins. Meanwhile, the hall where the matches would take place was slowly filling up, with over 200 people already in attendance. Damon had spent his time trying to imagine his opponent, since he knew nothing about him. He was stuck with speculation, his mind racing with possibilities. Just as he was about to leave the room after changing, a ding sound echoed through the air. He sat back down, his eyes fixed on the system interface as it opened before him. A quest notification flashed on the screen. Quest issued title. AN Entertainer. Damon's eyes widened as he read the details. Win your match in a dramatic finish and make yourself KNOWN. He felt a surge of excitement at the prospect of a dramatic finish. But then he read the next part. Win by KO. Striking move and proficiency feature. Win by submission. Submission move, proficiency feature. Damon's heart raced as he realized the stakes. He had to win, and win big. But then he saw the punishment for losing. Lose. Grade deduction on physical stats. He swallowed hard, his mind racing with the implications. He already had a bad physique, and the thought of making it worse was terrifying. He didn't want to find out how bad it could get. Damon's eyes remained fixed on the screen, his mind reeling with the weight of expectation. He knew he had to win, no matter what. The question was, could he do it? Damon smiled to himself, feeling a sense of satisfaction as he looked around the room. He began to clean up, placing his belongings in the box that Mr. Steele had sent him. He would leave with it when he departed. As he worked, his gaze fell upon the mirror. He stared at his reflection, taking in his appearance. The shorts and gloves made him look like a fighter, but his 6 feet 2 inches height made him appear very skinny for a 125-pound weight class. He shrugged, not worrying too much about it. He had more important things on his mind. Just as he finished packing, a knock sounded from the door. Damon turned to face it, his heart beating slightly faster with anticipation. With a final deep breath, Damon stepped past the inspector and into the octagon. The door closed behind him with a loud clang, and he was enveloped in the electric atmosphere of the ring. His mind was focused, his body ready for the battle ahead. The announcer's voice boomed through the speakers, "Damon Cross." Damon stepped into the ring, his eyes scanning the crowd. Then, his opponent made his entrance, and Damon was surprised. The guy was short, much shorter than Damon had expected. But then he realized, he was already too tall for this weight class. As his opponent entered the ring, the announcer said his name, Johnny Creed. The crowd cheered, and the announcer left the ring, making way for the referee. Meanwhile, in the broadcast booth, the commentators introduced themselves. "Hello, I'm Michael Bosley, and welcome to Battle Extreme here in Stockton, California. I'm joined today by my partner, Daniel Green." Daniel added, "That's right, Michael. We've got a spectacular card lined up for you today, but we're starting off with a flyweight match that's got everyone talking." Michael continued, "That's right. And what a peculiar match it is. We've got Damon Cross, the towering flyweight, taking on Johnny Creed. Daniel, what are your thoughts on this one?" Daniel chuckled. "I mean, let's start with this behemoth of a man. I repeat this every time, just as weight has an impact on the match, height is too. When one cuts weight so low for their height that they look like they've been starved, then they shouldn't be fighting. That's my opinion. I don't know about you." Michael laughed. "Well, as we speak, the referee is telling the fighters the rules." The crowd, oblivious to the commentators' voices, continued to cheer and chant, eagerly awaiting the start of the match. As Damon and Johnny stood face to face in the center of the octagon, the referee stepped between them, his presence commanding attention. The noise of the crowd faded into the background as the referee's voice took precedence. "All right, gentlemen," the referee began, his tone firm but calm, "you've both been briefed on the rules. Protect yourselves at all times. Listen to my instructions, and keep the fight clean." His gaze shifted from Damon to Johnny, ensuring both fighters were locked in. No strikes to the back of the head, no knees to a grounded opponent, and no grabbing the fence. "If I say stop, you stop immediately. Understand?" Both fighters nodded, their eyes never leaving each other. "Good," the referee continued, stepping back just slightly. "Touch gloves if you want to, and let's have a good fight." Damon and Johnny tapped gloves briefly, a show of respect before the battle ahead, then backed up to their corners, muscles coiled with anticipation. The referee glanced between them one last time, then raised his hand. "Ready, fight." With that command, the fight was on. Chapter 41. The distance game. Damon stepped back, his eyes fixed intently on his opponent, Johnny Creed. He took in every detail, from Johnny's compact, muscular build to his short stature. Damon's mind worked quickly, formulating a strategy to exploit Johnny's limitations. He decided to maintain a safe distance, utilizing his height advantage to keep Johnny at bay. Damon adopted a traditional Muay Thai stance, his feet shoulder-width apart, with his left foot forward and his right foot back. He kept his knees slightly bent, his weight evenly distributed between both legs. His hands were up, with his left hand in front of his left ear and his right hand in front of his right ear. His elbows were close to his body, with his forearms parallel to the ground. Johnny, on the other hand, took on a classic boxing stance, his feet shoulder-width apart, with his left foot forward and his right foot back. His hands were up, with his left hand in front of his left ear and his right hand in front of his right ear. His elbows were close to his body, with his forearms parallel to the ground. Michael Bosley, the commentator, spoke in a clear, excited voice, "And there they are, folks. Damon Cross, the debutante, taking on Johnny Creed, the experienced boxer. It looks like we have a Muay Thai versus boxing matchup, which should make for an interesting fight." Daniel Green, the co-commentator, nodded in agreement. That's right, Michael. And looking at Damon's stance, it seems he's planning to utilize his height advantage to keep Johnny at a distance. The referee, a tall, imposing figure, stood between them, his eyes fixed on both fighters. The referee pointed on the middle, moving back, signaling the start of the fight. Damon and Johnny circled each other cautiously. Damon kept his stance wide, his long arms extended, ready to jab at any moment. He knew he had to keep Johnny at a distance. The shorter fighter was powerful and explosive, likely to charge in with a flurry of punches if given the chance. Johnny feinted a jab, testing Damon's reactions. Damon didn't bite, keeping his composure and maintaining the gap between them. He could feel the eyes of the crowd on him, their energy buzzing in the air. But he blocked it out, focusing solely on Johnny. Suddenly, Johnny lunged forward with a fast combination. Jab, jab, hook. Damon stepped back swiftly, using his reach to his advantage. Johnny's punches missed by inches, and Damon countered with a sharp teep kick, his long leg driving into Johnny's midsection. The crowd let out a murmur of approval. He had to keep control of the fight, use his reach, and stay disciplined. Johnny was tough, but Damon knew he was just as capable. They circled each other again, the tension thick in the air. Damon jabbed, then faked a teep kick, trying to keep Johnny guessing. Johnny was cautious, his eyes locked on Damon, waiting for his chance. As they closed in again, Damon noticed the fight was heating up, and everyone could sense it. But Damon wasn't thinking about the crowd. He was thinking about Johnny, about the next move, about staying one step ahead. Just as Damon threw a low kick, Johnny exploded forward with a sudden flurry of punches, trying to overwhelm him. Damon's instincts kicked in. He leaned back, using his height to avoid most of the shots, then countered with a swift uppercut. The uppercut connected cleanly, snapping Johnny's head back. The crowd erupted, the noise deafening. Johnny staggered but didn't go down, his experience keeping him on his feet. Michael's voice boomed, "What a shot." Damon just landed a solid uppercut, and Johnny felt that one. Daniel added, "But Johnny's still standing. This guy's tough, and Damon needs to keep the pressure on." Damon's mind was racing, but his body moved on autopilot. He saw the opportunity and went for it, stepping in with a powerful right hook. Johnny ducked just in time, the punch sailing over his head. Johnny countered with a hook of his own, aiming for Damon's ribs. The shot connected, and Damon felt the wind rush out of him. He clenched his teeth, trying not to show any pain. He couldn't let Johnny see any weakness. Not now. They separated again, both fighters breathing heavily. The shot connected, and Damon felt the wind rush out of him. He clenched his teeth, trying not to show any pain. He couldn't let Johnny see any weakness. Not now. They separated again, both fighters breathing heavily. Damon could feel the fight slipping into a rhythm, the back and forth of two skilled opponents testing each other, trying to find a crack in the other's defense. But Damon knew he had to do more than just survive. He had to win, and he had to do it in style. The quest still lingered in the back of his mind, pushing him to go for a dramatic finish. Chapter 42. The turning point. Round 1 continued, and Damon and Johnny were both showing signs of fatigue. Damon's breath was coming in quick gasps, and his face was starting to show the effects of the fight. A red spot formed on his cheek from Johnny's punches. Johnny, too, had a few red marks and swelling from Damon's earlier strikes. Damon's strategy to keep Johnny at bay had worked well, but Johnny was skilled at finding openings. Damon felt the pressure mounting, his mind racing with frustration. He was beginning to make small mistakes, letting Johnny close the distance more often. As they engaged again, Johnny threw a quick combination. Jab, jab, hook. Damon tried to respond with a kick, but Johnny ducked under it and landed a solid right hand to Damon's jaw. Damon staggered, feeling the sting of the punch. He grimaced, but Johnny didn't press the attack, choosing to circle instead. The referee moved in to break them apart, and the round ended. The bell rang, signaling the end of round 1. Michael Bosley's voice cut through the noise. "What a round. Damon Cross has shown some impressive skill with his height advantage, but Johnny Creed has landed some solid shots and kept the pressure on." Daniel Green added, "That's right, Michael. Damon's got the height and reach, but Johnny's experience is showing. Damon's making some mistakes now, letting Johnny close the distance more than he should." In Johnny's corner, His coach was giving him a detailed rundown. Damon's height is a problem for us, but we're getting inside. He's showing some fatigue, and his kicks are getting sloppier. Keep pressuring him and make him work harder. He's starting to make mistakes, so capitalize on it. Use your speed and combinations to break through his defense. Johnny nodded, his face determined. Got it. Damon sat on his stool in his corner, alone but focused. He took a few deep breaths, trying to shake off the frustration. His body ached, but he knew he had to keep going. He wiped the sweat from his brow and stood up as the bell rang for round 2. The fight resumed. Damon started the round with a series of leg kicks, trying to regain control and tire Johnny out. His kicks landed with thuds, hitting Johnny's thighs and causing him to wince. He took a deep breath, feeling the cool air fill his lungs, and looked down at Johnny, still knocked out on the canvas. He knew his last strike had been sloppy, a wild and uncontrolled swing that had caught Johnny flush on the jaw. And he knew that going after Johnny after he went down, hammering him with punch after punch, had been the deciding factor in the fight. The crowd's cheers grew louder, a deafening roar that filled the arena and reverberated off the walls. Damon felt his heart pounding in his chest, his pulse racing with excitement and adrenaline. He raised his arms, his fists clenched in triumph, and let out a shout of victory. Michael Bosley's voice cut through the noise, his words echoing off the walls of the arena. That is spectacular. A magnificent debut, as Damon Cross secures his first win. His partner, Daniel Green, chuckled and added, he is now 1-0, and I gotta say, despite what I said in the beginning, I still stand by it. With skills like that, he can do better in the higher weight class. As the commentators spoke, Johnny began to stir on the canvas, his body slowly coming back to life. He moved his arms, his hands flexing as he tried to sit up. The referee moved in, his hands helping Johnny to his feet, and the crowd's cheers grew even louder. Damon stood tall, his chest heaving with exhaustion, his arms still raised in triumph. He felt the sweat dripping down his face, he grinned, his lips still spread wide across his face, and let out another shout of victory, basking in the adoration of the crowd. Chapter 43. The announcement. Johnny was now standing, talking to his coach, who was offering words of encouragement and analysis of the fight. Damon, on the other hand, stood next to the cage, waiting for the announcer to enter. His chest was still heaving with exhaustion, and his arms were still raised in triumph. The referee moved to the middle of the octagon, calling both fighters to join him. The announcer, a tall, slender man with a booming voice, entered the cage, a microphone in hand. The crowd was still cheering, their voices echoing off the walls of the arena. The lights were shining brightly, illuminating every detail of the scene. Damon's eyes were fixed on the announcer, his face still flushed with excitement and adrenaline. Michael Bosley's voice came through the broadcast, his words clear and concise. Now the question is he going to be like the Titan? Because, looking at him now, they are very similar. No fighting records, but very experienced. No team, no coach. We might be looking at another rising star. Daniel Green agreed, his voice equally clear. I see what you mean, and that's possible. But only time can tell. He's got talent, let's hope he doesn't waste it. The announcer raised his hands, calling for silence. The crowd slowly quieted down, their voices dying away. The announcer smiled, his eyes shining with excitement. The referee grasped the hands of both fighters, his grip firm but gentle. The crowd's cheers subsided slightly, their voices dropping to a gentle hum as they awaited the official announcement. The announcer's voice boomed through the arena, his words clear and concise. Ladies and gentlemen, referee John Doe has called a stop to this contest at 2 minutes and 35 seconds in the second round, declaring the winner by TKO. Damon Cross. The two fighters shared a moment of mutual respect, their differences forgotten in the spirit of competition. They said their goodbyes, and Johnny walked towards his team, who were waiting for him with nods of encouragement. Damon, on the other hand, walked towards the gate, leaving the cage behind. As he stepped out of the octagon, the bright lights of the arena gave way to the dimmer glow of the backstage area. The sounds of the crowd grew fainter, replaced by the murmur of voices and the rustle of movement. Damon made his way back to the back room, his footsteps echoing off the walls. Michael Bosley turned to his partner, Daniel Green, a wide grin spreading across his face. Well, Daniel, this was a hell of an opening match, he said, his voice filled with excitement. I think I'll expect more from him. He'll certainly shake up the flyweight division. Daniel Green nodded in agreement, his eyes shining with enthusiasm. Indeed, he said, his voice clear and concise. I almost forgot it was an opening match. The way Damon Cross performed out there, it was like he was a seasoned veteran. Michael Bosley chuckled, his eyes sparkling with amusement. I know what you mean, he said. He's got a lot of potential, and I think we'll be seeing great things from him in the future. Daniel Green leaned forward, his voice taking on a more serious tone. As for him staying in the flyweight division, I think we'll be seeing him higher on the next division soon, he said. He's got the skills and the talent to make a real impact in the sport. Damon entered his room, his footsteps echoing off the walls. He walked over to the table, his movements slow and deliberate, and set down the large box he was carrying. He let out a deep sigh, feeling the weight of his exhaustion. He wiped the sweat from his face, his hands moving slowly across his forehead. He sat up, his eyes fixed on the door, a small smile playing on his lips. Then, his gaze shifted to his gloves, still clutched in his hands. He began to remove them, his fingers fumbling slightly as he pulled them off. His hands felt numb and free, the sensation a welcome relief after the intense fight. Next, he took out his mouthguard, his teeth feeling strange and exposed without it. He let out a laugh, the sound echoing off the walls. Ah ha 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 ha, he chuckled, his eyes shining with amusement. This is fun, this is life, he said, his voice filled with joy. Chapter 44. The aftermath. A door knock woke Damon up from his short nap, jolting him back to reality. He cleared his throat, gathering himself as he sat up. Ah, fuck, he muttered, feeling the adrenaline wear off and the pain of the punches setting in. He slowly got up from the table, his muscles aching as he walked towards the door. He opened the door to find a man in a black uniform standing in the hallway. It was the same guy who had led him to the arena for the weigh-in. Mr. Cross, congratulations on your debut, the man said, his voice firm and professional. Damon scratched his head, still trying to shake off the sleep. Thanks, he replied, his voice gruff from disuse. The man smiled slightly. Well, I'm here to lead you to the shower locker room. You must be eager to clean up after that intense fight. Damon couldn't help but look down at himself, taking in his sweat-stained clothes and the bruises already forming on his skin. He sniffed, wincing at his own smell. He knew he needed a shower badly. Okay, wait here, he said, turning back into the room to grab his clothes. He emerged a moment later, his gear in hand. All right, lead the way, he said, following the man out of the room and into the hallway. As they walked, Damon's eyes took in the unfamiliar surroundings. The hallway was long and narrow, with doors leading off to either side. The man in black led him to a door at the far end, which he pushed open with a nod. Locker room showers, he said. You'll find everything you need in there. Damon nodded, stepping inside as the man turned to leave. The door closed behind him, and he was alone once more. He took a deep breath, feeling the weight of his exhaustion. He took a deep breath, feeling the exhaustion start to creep back in. He knew he needed to go to the office and collect his pay, but he just wanted to rest. Damon forced himself to move, his legs feeling heavy with exhaustion. He wandered around the building, looking for a staff member to ask where the office was. He walked down a long hallway, his footsteps echoing off the walls. The fluorescent lights overhead cast a bright glow, making him squint. After a few minutes of walking, he saw a staff member standing at a desk, typing away on a computer. Damon approached him, clearing his throat to get his attention. "Excuse me," he said, trying to sound clear and concise. "Can you tell me where the office is?" The staff member looked up, a friendly smile on his face. "Ah, yeah, the office is just down that way," he said, pointing down a nearby hallway. "You can't miss it. Just look for the sign that says, office." Damon nodded, thanking him, and set off in the direction he had been pointed. He walked for a few minutes, his eyes scanning the doors for the right one. Finally, he saw it, a door with a simple sign that read, office. Damon was surprised by how easily he found the office. He had expected a long search, but instead, he was pointed in the right direction and found it quickly. He wondered if the building only had one office, or if the office was just a well-known location. He stood in front of the door, his hand hesitating for a moment before knocking. Knock, knock. The sound echoed through the hallway, and a deep voice boomed from inside. Come in, it said. Damon took a deep breath, turned the handle, and pushed the door open. Chapter 45, Why Do You Fight? Damon stepped inside, and his ears picked up the sound of people talking. He expected to see a room full of staff members, but instead, he only saw one person sitting behind a desk. As he looked closer, he realized it was the same man they called Mr. Steele. Damon's eyes scanned the room, trying to find the source of the sound. That's when he saw it. A flat-screen TV mounted on the wall, showing the MMA match. The commentary filled the room, and Damon's eyes widened as he recognized the cage. It was the same one he had fought in just hours before. He took a step closer to the TV, his eyes fixed on the screen. The crowd was cheering, and the commentators were analyzing the fighters' moves. Damon noticed that the crowd seemed bigger than before, and he wondered if the crowd had started to fill up after his fight since his was only an opening fight. Mr. Steele looked up from his desk, catching Damon's gaze. He smiled and nodded, his eyes returning to the screen. Mr. Steele's voice broke the silence, his words unexpected. Isn't it beautiful? He said, his eyes still fixed on the screen. Damon thought he had misheard, so he looked at Mr. Steele, seeking clarification. Sorry, sir, I didn't catch that, he replied, his voice a bit louder than a whisper. Mr. Steele stood up, his movements deliberate. He placed his hands on the table, his fingers splayed wide. I meant, isn't it beautiful? He repeated, his eyes locking onto Damon's. The sport, for one who doesn't know martial arts, this scene would just be sweaty men busy punching each other like barbarians. He paused, his gaze intense. Damon was about to respond, but Mr. Steele continued, his words flowing like a river. But when you know what they're doing, you understand the beauty of it. The room remained silent, the only sound the soft hum of the air conditioning. Damon's eyes locked onto Mr. Steele's, searching for a hint of what he was looking for, but Mr. Steele's expression remained neutral, his eyes piercing but unreadable. Mr. Steele's smile grew wider as he spoke. You know, this is the reason I let Jake pass on without any extended help and let him go to the UFA. Damon's mind flashed to Joey's brother, and he wondered what Mr. Steele saw in Jake that he didn't see in him. He's a hell of a kid in the cage, and from what I've seen from you, you have the potential, Mr. Steele continued, his eyes narrowing slightly. But his reason was taking care of his brother, that's it. Commendable, and nothing wrong with it. But it's not what I'm looking for. Mr. Steele paused, his gaze intensifying. Even if you're not what I want at the end of the day, if you've got talent like you do, I won't hinder your path. Like Jake Morales, your talent will be shown if you have it. But tell me, why do you fight? Damon's mind went blank as he searched for an answer. He thought for what felt like an eternity, but even he wasn't satisfied with the reasons he came up with. Do I enjoy fighting? The thought echoed in his mind, and he couldn't shake off the feeling that it was true. I feel happy when I fight. Does that mean I love it and enjoy it? Damon's thoughts swirled in a vortex of confusion. He couldn't help but want to deny it. Maybe it was because his father used to abuse him. Maybe he didn't want to admit he liked fighting because it would mean he enjoyed getting abused. The thought sent a shiver down his spine, and he pushed it away, unsure of how to confront it. Mr. Steele's eyes never left his face, waiting for an answer that Damon wasn't sure he had. Or maybe an answer Damon didn't want to believe. Chapter 46, The Offer. Damon raised his head, his eyes locking onto Mr. Steele's with a mix of uncertainty and curiosity. I don't know, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Mr. Steele's smile grew wider, his eyes crinkling at the corners as he nodded knowingly. That's fine, Mr. Steele said, his voice low and soothing, like a gentle breeze on a summer day. I have an offer for you. He walked towards the table, his movements deliberate and calm, like a predator stalking its prey. Damon's eyes followed him, wondering what could be the offer that Mr. Steele was about to present. You know, even with all that talent, your skills are still not par, Mr. Steele said, his voice measured and calculated. Today's knockout could be called a fluke. So here's what I'm going to do. He paused, his gaze intensifying. like a laser beam focusing on its target. From what I've seen, you're good, but I need convincing. I want you to win your next 3 fights. Damon's eyes widened, his mind racing with the implications. 3 fights. That was a tall order, especially considering his last fight was a knockout, but Mr. Steele's confidence was infectious, and Damon found himself wanting to believe. And I will make sure you get the best training, Mr. Steele continued, his voice dripping with conviction. I'll bring in the top coaches, the best sparring partners. You'll have everything you need to succeed. He paused, his eyes glinting with determination. You'll be a contender, Damon. A real contender. Damon couldn't believe it. This was an opportunity of a lifetime, one that he couldn't afford to pass up. But why was Mr. Steele doing this for him? What did he want in return? Why? Damon asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Mr. Steele ignored his question, his expression unreadable. Not only will I do that, I'll make sure you get paid for your fights. You'll be well taken care of. He pulled an envelope from his suit pocket and held it out to Damon. The white envelope seemed to glow in the dim light of the office, its edges crisp and sharp. The sun was setting, casting a golden light over everything. He smiled to himself, thinking about the offer Mr. Steele had made. He walked across the parking, he couldn't help but mumble to himself, I'll run through them. He felt a surge of determination and confidence. He was going to win those fights, no matter what it took. He settled into the worn leather seat of the cab, the soft creaking of the cushions enveloping him in a sense of familiarity. To the Sunset Motel, he said, his voice firm and clear, as he gazed out the window at the passing cityscape. The drive took its time, the cab crawling through the evening traffic like a slow-moving beast. Damon decided to open up his status interface to pass some time. He focused his mind, and a holographic display flickered to life in front of him. The interface materialized, its sleek lines and minimalist design a testament to its advanced technology. Congratulations for completing the quest, the first notification read. He smiled, a sense of pride and accomplishment washing over him like a warm wave. A dramatic finish reward, striking move, and proficiency feature. He grinned, feeling a surge of excitement at the new abilities and upgrades. He spent the next few minutes scrolling through the interface, taking in the details of his reward. The cab ride seemed shorter now, his attention focused on the holographic display. The cab driver's voice broke the silence. We're arriving at the Sunset Motel, sir. Damon nodded, his eyes still fixed on the interface. He closed the interface, the holographic display flickering out of existence, and looked up at the motel's neon-broken sign, its bright colors glowing like a beacon in the evening light. Chapter 47. New move and proficiency feature. The morning light hit the motel, casting a warm glow over the parking lot and rooms. Aoife could be seen walking towards a room, carrying a cart filled with cleaning materials. Her bright yellow uniform stood out against the muted colors of the motel. She moved with a quiet efficiency, her dark hair tied back in a neat ponytail. In the parking lot, a young man could be seen practicing martial arts. He was shirtless, his muscular torso glistening with sweat. His movements were fluid and precise, his kicks flying through the air with a soft whooshing sound. His feet bare, he stood on the rough asphalt, his eyes fixed intently on some point in front of him. The sound of birds chirping, the gentle breeze rustled the leaves of the trees, causing the motel's neon sign to creak softly. Aoife inserted her keycard into the door lock and pushed the cart inside. She began to tidy up the room, her movements quick and efficient. Damon's focus was intense as he practiced the striking move he had won from the quest. Last night's massage had piqued his interest, and he was determined to master the technique. Striking move, ? Kick. It is a complex maneuver that requires precision and power. A ? Kick is a deceptive martial arts technique that starts like a roundhouse kick, leading the opponent to expect a body or leg strike. Midway through the motion, the kicker subtly pulls the leg back and then quickly redirects it upward in a sweeping arc, resembling the shape of a ? This sudden change in direction targets the opponent's head or face, making the kick difficult to anticipate or block, and is often used to catch opponents off guard. Damon's legs trembled slightly as he attempted the ? Kick. He started with a roundhouse motion, his foot swinging in a wide arc. There was no punishment listed, but Damon knew that losing wasn't an option. He had to win those matches. The sun beat down on him, warming his skin. The sound of birds chirping and traffic humming in the distance filled the air. Damon's muscles ached, but he felt invigorated. Damon pushed open the creaky door and stepped into the room, the familiar scent of worn furniture and stale air enveloping him. His mom, Aoife, sat on the edge of the bed, her eyes fixed on him as he entered. She wore her usual attire, a faded yellow blouse with tiny white flowers and a pair of worn jeans, her dark hair tied back in a neat ponytail. "Damon, are you done with your training? Didn't you say we should leave early for the shops?" she asked, her voice gentle but laced with a hint of excitement. Damon nodded, dropping his martial arts gear on the floor with a soft thud. "Yes, I'm done, I'll be quick and join you." He grabbed the fresh clothes he had laid out earlier, the Battle Extreme merchandise he had won, and headed to the bathroom. The cool tiles felt refreshing under his feet as he stepped inside. Inside, he began to undress further, pulling off his sweat-drenched pants and shorts, revealing his naked body. He winced slightly as he moved, his muscles aching from the physical toll of his martial arts journey. As he stood under the shower, Damon gazed at his reflection in the mirror. His face was a map of bruises, the purple and blue marks a proof to the intense training and matches he had endured. But he was recovering slowly, his body repairing the damage. His mind, however, was elsewhere. Today, he and his mom were going to buy new clothes. They had been living in their old clothes for too long, reminders of their homeless days. Damon had a few new shirts and pants, gifts from Joey and BE, but his mom deserved some new things too. The warm water continued to cascade down his skin, refreshing him, as he thought about the day ahead. Chapter 48. A new wardrobe. Damon walked alongside his mom, Aoife, as they made their way to the thrift store Joey had recommended. The sun cast a warm glow over the sidewalk, and the air was filled with the sweet scent of blooming flowers. They passed by a small cafe, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee wafting out into the street. As they walked, Damon couldn't help but feel a sense of excitement and gratitude. The envelope from Mr. Steele had contained a generous sum of $600, which would go a long way in helping them get back on their feet. He had told his mom about it last night, and they had agreed to use some of it to buy new clothes. The thrift store came into view, its faded sign creaking gently in the breeze. Aoife pushed open the door, and they stepped inside. The store was dimly lit, the air thick with the scent of old clothes and fabric softener. Rows of racks stretched out before them, packed tightly with garments of every color and style. Damon's eyes widened as he scanned the racks, overwhelmed by the sheer amount of choices. He hadn't been in a clothing store since they fled Ireland, and the experience felt foreign yet exciting. Aoife smiled and took his hand, leading him deeper into the store. As they browsed, Damon's fingers trailed over the fabrics, feeling the softness of cotton, the smoothness of polyester, and the roughness of denim. Damon watched as his mother's eyes lingered on a dress, her gaze softening as she reached out to touch the fabric. He encouraged her, "Come on, Mom, try it on. There's a fitting room, and it's only." He checked the price tag, his eyes widening in surprise. $10, he exclaimed, handing her the dress. "If it fits or you like it, we can take it," he said, gently pushing her towards the changing room. As his mother disappeared into the fitting room, Damon continued browsing the racks, his fingers trailing over the garments. Damon's ears perked up at the mention of electronics. He had been thinking about finding a stove, maybe they could finally have their first home-cooked meal. He looked at the lady. "Thank you," he said, his voice sincere. As they left the thrift store, Damon carried the plastic bags in each hand, the weight of their new clothes and shoes a tangible reminder of their successful shopping trip. They walked towards the store the cashier had directed them to, the one that supposedly sold electronics. The sign above the door read, "Second-hand electronics," and Damon felt a surge of excitement at the prospect of finding a stove. As they entered the store, they were immediately greeted by rows of old computers and monitors, their screens dark and uninviting. The air inside was surprisingly fresh. Damon looked around, his eyes scanning the shelves for any sign of stoves. But all he saw were electronics, no stoves in sight. "Mom, I don't think they sell stoves here," he said, a wry smile spreading across his face. Aoife rolled her eyes good-naturedly. "You haven't even asked the people working here yet. Come on, go on, ask." Damon scratched his head, feeling a bit silly for not thinking of that. He walked towards the counter, where a short man with a receding hairline looked up from behind the counter. "Good morning, sir," Damon said, trying to sound confident. Morning. How may I help you? The man replied, his voice friendly. Damon asked, I was wondering if you had any stoves that I could buy. The man's face lit up with a wide smile. Oh, sure, come with me. He walked around the counter, Damon following close behind. They wove through the rows of electronics, Damon's eyes fixed on the man's back. Finally, they stopped in front of a large stove, one that looked like it belonged in a commercial kitchen. Damon's heart sank. He hadn't been looking for something this big, this expensive. And it would definitely need delivery. The man stood proudly beside the stove, a look of expectation on his face. Damon didn't know whether to laugh or cry. This was not what he had been hoping for. Chapter 49. A smaller stove. Damon shook his head. No, you misunderstood. This one's too big, I want a smaller one. He didn't want to pay for a large machine that would be a hassle to transport and install. The man's face fell. Ah, I see. Unfortunately, I don't think we have any of that, but I could ask in the back, just wait for me at the counter. He scratched his bald head, looking apologetic. Damon returned to the counter, where his mom was waiting, her eyes inquiring. So, did you find it? She asked, her voice laced with skepticism. Damon smiled wryly. Yep, we found it, but it's a tad too big and probably expensive. He knew his mom would be concerned about the cost. I told you, Damon, we should stick to buying food. A stove is just too much expensive, she said, her voice rising in argument. Damon nodded understandingly. I know, Mom, but don't worry, the cashier said he'll check in the back. If they don't find it, I won't insist. He tried to reassure her, knowing she was worried about their limited budget. His mom didn't know he could buy ingredients on his system without needing money. Mere moments later, the man returned, a hint of a smile on his face. Okay, there's a small 2-plate stove, he said, his voice laced with a sense of accomplishment. Damon's eyes lit up, and he turned to his mom, about to speak, but the man's next words caught him off guard. But there's a problem, the man added, his smile faltering. Damon's gaze snapped back to the man, his curiosity piqued. What's wrong? I thought you said you had it, he asked, a hint of confusion creeping into his voice. The man's expression turned wry, and he rubbed the back of his neck. Oh, we do. The problem is that the stove is a 2-plate, but one side doesn't work, he admitted, his honesty surprising Damon. Damon's eyes narrowed, his mind weighing the pros and cons. A 2-plate stove with one faulty side was better than nothing. The man's candor, however, was refreshing. Normally, salespeople wouldn't even mention the product's flaws, but this man's transparency put Damon at ease. Aoife nodded decisively. Okay, we'll take it. It's better than nothing. How much is it? She asked, her practicality taking over. Finally, they finished, the room looking like a treasure trove of second-hand goodies. Damon's mom smiled, her eyes shining with satisfaction. Let's get organized, she said, her voice filled with a sense of purpose. He nodded, already starting to unpack the boxes. The day was still long, but they had accomplished so much already. Damon realized they'll need some ingredients. Mom, I'll be back. We forgot the ingredients. I'll go to a nearby store. He rushed out of the motel room, his mom's voice calling after him. Damon, wait, but he was already gone, disappearing around the corner. Aoife shook her head, chuckling to herself. You don't even know what to buy, she muttered, returning to fold the clothes they had purchased. But Damon didn't need to go far. He just went around the corner and opened his system interface shop. The familiar screen glowed in front of him, and he scrolled through the options. He felt a little weird deciding their menu, but he picked out some ingredients he thought were necessary. He had never cooked before, so he had no idea what to buy. But he figured meat was a good place to start, and he bought 2 pieces, each costing 1 system coin. Coins. 122. Looking at his coins, he knew he could buy ingredients for a good amount of time. He had 122 coins left, and each week, he earned more from his matches and daily training challenges. In the last 5 months, he had made $150, which had been spent on water, bananas, bread, and other essentials. But now, with his system coins, he could buy ingredients without worrying about the cost. Damon closed the interface, feeling a sense of excitement. He couldn't wait to see what his mom would make with the ingredients he had bought. He headed back to the motel room, eager to start cooking. Chapter 50. A simple meal. Aoife stood at the small stove, expertly cooking the steak on the one working plate. The sizzling sound filled the room, accompanied by a savory aroma that made their mouths water. Damon watched as his mom worked, the smell of cooking meat and spices filling the air. The rice, cooked earlier, sat in a separate pot, its fluffy texture a testament to Aoife's culinary skills. Damon had helped with the simple tasks, like washing the rice and stirring it occasionally. As they worked, the motel room's worn carpet and faded curtains seemed less noticeable. The room was filled with the smell of cooking meat and steaming rice, teasing their taste buds and building their anticipation. Finally, Aoife placed the finished steak on a plate, alongside the cooked rice. Aoife took the plate and walked towards Damon. Damon looked up at his mother in confusion, wondering why she was staring at him like that. He took the plate from her, his hands wrapping around the warm plate. He grabbed the spoon. As he scooped up the first bite, he was about to put it to his mouth when he looked up. He saw his mother staring at him, a smile spreading across her face. Aoife saw Damon stop, his spoon hovering in midair, and urged him on. "Come on, eat up," she said, her voice soft and encouraging. Damon shook his head, a small smile playing on his lips. He went back to eating, his spoon moving towards his mouth. He took the first bite, the tender steak touching his tongue. The flavors exploded in his mouth, the savory taste of the meat and the slight char from the pan. He chewed slowly, savoring the taste. It was nothing he had ever tasted before. The steak was tender, the texture melting in his mouth. Aoife nodded, her expression softening. "You and your training, I should lock you in here," she joked, trying to lighten the mood. Her voice was warm, teasing, and it worked. Damon laughed, the sound genuine, his tension easing. He took another bite of his food, the flavors dancing on his tongue, but his mind still lingered on the past, on the memories he wished he could erase. As they continued their dinner, enjoying each other's company, they chatted and laughed, savoring the warmth of the moment. The room was cozy. They finished dinner, satisfied and content. After dinner, they cleaned up, the room growing hotter without air conditioning. They took turns taking a shower, the single shower in the motel room a reminder of their simple circumstances. The water was warm, refreshing, and soothing, washing away the fatigue of the day. With that done, they each got into their single beds, the beds creaking softly as they settled in. "Good night, Mom," Damon said, his voice gentle, closing his eyes. His eyelids felt heavy, his body relaxed. "Good night," she replied, her voice sounded tired, but peaceful. Her words were soft, barely above a whisper, as if she didn't want to break the tranquility of the moment. The night fell, the moon shining brightly outside, casting a silver glow through the window. The room grew darker, the shadows deepening, but the atmosphere remained calm and serene. A lot of people don't get what they want, but a lot do. Life is unpredictable, and the future is uncertain. No one can claim to know what's going to happen next. Damon's desire to meet his father is strong, but will it happen? Maybe it will, maybe it won't. Maybe they'll meet and Damon will finally get the answers he's been searching for. But the real question isn't about when or how they'll meet. It's not even about why Damon wants to meet him. The real question is about courage. Will Damon have the guts to do what he wants to do? Will he be brave enough to face his father and confront the emotions he's been carrying around for so long? Chapter 51. Falling back into routine, and days and weeks passed like that, each one blending into the next. Damon finally got the weekly training quest he had been waiting for from the system, and he threw himself into his training, preparing for his upcoming fight. He spent hours in the parking lot of the motel, sweating and pushing himself to his limits. He practiced his kicks and punches, his movements swift and precise. He ran laps around the parking lot, his feet pounding the asphalt. He trained every day, his body aching as he pushed himself to get stronger and faster. One of the moves he was determined to master was the question mark kick. He practiced it over and over in the parking lot, his legs swinging through the air, but his proficiency was slow in coming. He didn't think it would be a good idea to use it in his fight when it was stuck on 14%, not yet. As the days turned into weeks, they fell into a familiar routine. Damon woke up every morning to train in the parking lot, his muscles aching as he pushed himself to get stronger and faster. Aoife spent her days cleaning the motel rooms, her hands moving as she made the beds and changed the sheets. The parking lot became a comfortable training ground, a sense of normalcy in their once chaotic lives. Damon moved through his training with ease, his movements practiced and familiar. Aoife watched him from the motel room window, her eyes shining with encouragement. Through the weeks, Damon had to visit the medical center for tests, which were required before any fight. He sat in the waiting room, flipping through magazines, waiting for his name to be called. When it was, he stood up and walked to the examination room, his feet echoing off the walls. Damon's mind was focused, his eyes fixed on the prize. He would do whatever it took to win, to make sure he didn't disappoint Mr. Steele or himself. He was ready for Mark Henderson, ready to face whatever he threw his way. Now that he had only 1 week left before his match, Damon pushed himself harder than ever before. He trained relentlessly, pouring all his energy into his preparations. The fight would remain in the same venue, so there wasn't a lot of change. But he knew he had to give it his all if he wanted to win. As the days passed, Damon's training started to decrease. He didn't want to overdo it and risk injuring himself just before the fight. He had to pace himself, make sure he was fresh and ready for the big day. He washed his kit, making sure everything was clean and ready for the fight. He laid out his clothes, his gloves, and his mouthguard, double-checking that he had everything he needed. On the eve of the fight, Damon didn't do any strenuous exercises. He just stretched his body, loosening his muscles and getting his blood flowing. He took a break, avoiding any heavy movements that might tire him out. Damon felt ready and focused for the fight. He had prepared well and now trusted his skills. His body was relaxed, muscles calm, and he was confident. With a clear mind and a steady breath, Damon was in the zone. He had visualized this moment, trained for it, and was now ready to execute. Damon snuggled under the blankets, feeling the softness of the bed beneath him. He closed his eyes, his mind quiet and focused. He took a deep breath, feeling the air fill his lungs, and then slowly released it. As he drifted off to sleep, Damon felt a sense of calm wash over him. Mark Henderson, it's your funeral. Chapter 52. The final showdown. Damon got out of the cab, standing in front of the community hall. The bright sunlight hit him, casting a warm light over the scene. He stretched his arms, feeling the weight of his kit in the plastic bag slung over his shoulder. He paid the driver, handing over the fare with a nod of thanks. The driver took the money, his eyes flicking to the plastic bag before returning to the road. Damon turned to face the community hall, his eyes scanning the building. He walked towards the entrance, his feet echoing off the pavement. The guards stood at the door, their eyes watchful and alert. They patted him down, their hands moving quickly and efficiently over his body. Damon stood still, his arms raised as the guards checked him for any prohibited items. He felt a sense of calm wash over him, his focus fixed on the fight ahead. He got to his room, the same room he had been in before, and began to prepare for the weigh-in. He placed the plastic bag containing his kit on the table and started to change into his shorts. He took off his pants and shirt, and then slipped on the shorts. He had noticed last time that fighters were not wearing underwear, so he followed suit. The shorts felt lightweight and comfortable against his skin. Damon stood in front of the mirror, checking his reflection. He looked focused, his eyes fixed on the task ahead. He took a deep breath, feeling the air fill his lungs, and then exhaled slowly. A knock came at the door, and Damon got up to follow the guy who had knocked. He didn't really need to follow him, since he still remembered the direction to the weigh-in room from last time. But he followed anyway, his feet carrying him down the familiar hallway. As he walked, the sound of murmured conversations and shuffling feet filled the air. The smell of sweat and adrenaline wafted through the corridor, mingling with the scent of freshly cleaned floors. Damon stood in front of a door, waiting for his turn to enter. He could hear the sound of voices inside, the rustling of papers, and the beeping of the scale. Then, he heard it. 123 for Mark Henderson, he makes weight. The voice was loud and clear, and it was followed by a small applause. As he exited the hallway, Damon bumped into Mr. Steele, who was standing with his arms crossed, eyeing him up and down. "Good luck out there, Mr. Steele said, his voice firm but encouraging. "I hope you bring your best." Mr. Steele patted Damon on the shoulder, his hand making a soft thudding sound on Damon's skin. Damon nodded, feeling a sense of determination wash over him. He continued walking, his feet carrying him back to his room. As he entered his room, Damon sat down on the bench, his eyes fixed on his reflection in the mirror. He took a deep breath, feeling the air fill his lungs, and then exhaled slowly. He looked at himself, taking in the sight of his lean physique, his focused eyes, and his determined expression. "It's time," he said to himself, his voice barely above a whisper. The words hung in the air, a simple statement of fact. It was time to put everything on the line, time to give it his all, time to show everyone what he was capable of. Damon's gaze lingered on his reflection for a moment longer, and then he stood up, his movements swift and decisive. He began to dress, his hands moving quickly and efficiently as he put on his gear. Damon wrapped his hands with the gloves, the soft padding enveloping his fingers as he secured them tightly. He then slipped on the fighting shorts, the lightweight material hugging his legs snugly. Finally, he inserted the mouthguard, the plastic molding to his teeth as he bit down on it, ready to absorb any impact. As he finished preparing, Damon took a moment to survey himself in the mirror. His eyes narrowed, his gaze intense, as he checked his gear. The gloves were secure, the shorts were in place, and the mouthguard was fitted perfectly. Quest ISSUEDQUEST. Win the MATCHREWARD. 10 coins. Chapter 53. Arrogance. The small hall was packed, every seat taken, and people standing in the aisles. Unlike last time, when the first match had a sparse audience, today's event had drawn a much larger crowd. Whether it was due to Damon's match or the growing popularity of Battle Extreme, the result was the same. A buzzing, electric atmosphere that seemed to vibrate through every molecule of air. On the table, Michael Bosley spoke through the broadcast, his voice clear and confident, carrying to wherever the show was being streamed. "Good afternoon, everyone," he said, his words accompanied by the sound of equipment and the murmur of the crowd. "After weeks of waiting, we're finally here, another show of Battle Extreme. Last show, we had a spectacular card, and today isn't any different." Michael's partner, Daniel Green, smiled, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "Indeed, as Michael said, today's card is good," he echoed, his voice smooth and rich. "And just like before, we're going to be opening this event with an interesting matchup." Before entering the cage, Damon was thoroughly checked and patted down by the officials, ensuring a fair and safe fight. As the music reached a crescendo, the announcer's voice boomed through the speakers, introducing Damon Cross. The crowd erupted in cheers and applause, their voices echoing off the walls of the packed hall. Damon stepped into the cage, his eyes scanning the sea of faces as he made his way to the center. He took a deep breath, feeling the cool air fill his lungs, and tried to calm his nerves. He knew that this fight was crucial, that losing would mean closing the door on the opportunity that had just opened for him. As he bounced around the canvas, his feet making soft thudding sounds on the mat, Damon focused on his breathing. He tried to clear his mind, to push aside the pressure and the doubts that crept in. He was ready for this, he had trained for this. Damon, his eyes fixed on Mark, stretched out his hand, his fist clenched, offering a traditional glove touch. But Mark, his expression unyielding, simply smirked and backed away, his eyes never leaving Damon's face. The crowd, sensing a hint of animosity, let out a collective "oh," their anticipation growing. The camera zoomed in on Mark's face, his smirk still plastered on his lips, his eyes gleaming with a hint of arrogance. Damon, on the other hand, simply shrugged his shoulders, his expression neutral, and backed away to his corner, his eyes never leaving Mark's face. The bell rang, its loud, metallic sound echoing through the hall, signaling the start of the fight. Damon, his eyes fixed intently on Mark, moved closer, his feet light on the canvas. He adopted his Muay Thai stance, his left foot forward, his right foot back, his weight evenly distributed between both legs. Damon glared at Mark, his eyes narrowing, his jaw clenched in concentration. He moved closer, his hands up, his fists clenched, his elbows close to his body. The two fighters met in the center of the cage, circling each other, sizing each other up. Damon scanned Mark's body, his eyes darting up and down, looking for an opening. He noticed Mark's leg foot was open, his weight shifted onto his back leg. Damon saw his chance, he threw a low kick, aiming for the inside of Mark's leg. The kick was swift, its impact loud, as Damon's foot connected with Mark's leg. Mark grunted, his face contorting in pain, as he hopped away, his leg buckling slightly. Damon quickly retreated, his hands still up, his eyes fixed on Mark, ready for his opponent's response. Chapter 54. Trading blows. Mark smirked, his voice cutting through the tense air. "You're out of your league, Cross. You think you're special," he taunted, his words laced with arrogance. Damon didn't respond, focusing instead on maintaining his stance. He shifted slightly, his body light on his feet, prepared for Mark's next move. Mark's eyes narrowed, and he darted forward, feinting with his left hand before throwing a quick jab aimed at Damon's face. Damon saw it coming and swayed back, narrowly avoiding the punch. "Mark's trying to bait Damon with those jabs," Michael Bosley commented from the table. "He's setting up for something bigger." "Yeah, but Damon's keeping his cool," Daniel Green added. "He's not falling for it." Mark didn't let up, pressing forward with another jab, but this time, Damon snapped a quick low kick to Mark's lead leg. The kick connected with a solid thud, and Mark grunted, retreating slightly. "You're gonna pay for that," Mark growled, shaking his leg out. He suddenly dropped his level and lunged for Damon's waist, going for a takedown. Damon reacted quickly, sprawling back and shoving Mark's head down, stopping the attempt. "Nice defense by Damon," Michael noted. He saw that takedown coming a mile away. Mark pushed off, backing up a few steps before raising his fists again. He looked frustrated but determined. "You're just running, Cross," Mark shouted, trying to rile Damon up. "Come on, fight me." Damon didn't rise to the bait, staying calm. He shuffled forward and threw another low kick, this time targeting Mark's other leg. The kick hit its mark, and Mark winced, his stance faltering for a moment. Mark stepped forward, throwing a wild right hook. Damon ducked under it and fired a quick knee into Mark's midsection. The strike wasn't perfect, but it was enough to make Mark stumble back. But the look in Mark's eyes showed that he was starting to realize just how tough Damon was. The final seconds of the round ticked away as Damon and Mark circled each other cautiously. Mark threw a half-hearted jab, but Damon easily sidestepped, maintaining his distance. The crowd's cheers echoed through the packed hall, the tension palpable. With a loud, metallic clang, the bell signaled the end of the round. Both fighters backed away, their expressions intense but controlled. Damon took a deep breath, his chest rising and falling as he made his way to his corner. He didn't have a team or coach waiting for him, just a lone stool where he sat, catching his breath and mentally reviewing the round. Mark, on the other hand, trudged to his corner, visibly frustrated. His corner team quickly surrounded him, offering water and advice as he leaned against the cage, his breaths heavy. "Listen, Mark," his coach said firmly, his voice cutting through the noise of the crowd. "You're letting him dictate the pace. He's keeping you at range with those kicks, and you're rushing in without thinking." Mark nodded, his eyes locked on his coach, but his frustration was clear. "Stop trying to go for those takedowns unless you're setting them up better," the coach continued. "He's reading them too easily. You need to feint more, make him commit, and then shoot in. If you keep telegraphing like that, he's just gonna stuff you every time." Mark clenched his fists, absorbing the advice. "Look, he's got a reach advantage, and he's using it well," another corner man chimed in. "But he's not invincible. His defense isn't perfect. He's dropping his hands a bit after those low kicks. If you time it right, you can catch him. And remember, you've got power. One good shot, and you can turn this around." Mark's coach nodded in agreement. "Exactly. Don't just charge in like a bull. Be smart, work the body a bit, and when you see him drop his guard, go for that right hook. But you have to stay patient. Don't let him frustrate you." Mark took a deep breath, nodding again. "Got it," he muttered, wiping the sweat from his brow. Across the cage, Damon remained quiet, his eyes focused and calm as he mentally prepared for the next round. He knew Mark would come out strong, and he needed to stay sharp. There was no one in his corner to advise him, but he trusted his instincts and training. Chapter 55, Takedown Successful. Michael Bosley and Daniel Green resumed their commentary as the second round approached. "Welcome back, folks," Michael said, his voice lively. "What an intense first round we just witnessed. Damon Cross and Mark Henderson are giving us a real show. Damon has been using his skills to keep Mark at bay, but Mark's coach has given him some crucial advice during the break." Daniel Green nodded in agreement. "Absolutely, Michael. Mark was getting frustrated, but he's now aware of his mistakes. We should see some adjustments this round. If he manages to use his wrestling and feints effectively, he could turn things around." The bell rang to start the second round, and both fighters quickly moved to the center of the cage. Mark seemed more focused, moving with purpose as he feinted a jab and then shot in for a takedown. Damon anticipated it well, stepping back and using his knee to block Mark's advance. Mark tried again, changing his approach by throwing a combination of strikes before attempting another takedown. This time, he managed to get a grip on Damon's leg but couldn't secure the takedown, as Damon used his height to push Mark away. Damon took advantage of the situation, landing a quick knee to Mark's ribs. Mark grunted in pain but quickly countered with a right hook that caught Damon off guard, making him stagger slightly. "Whoa, what a hit!" Michael exclaimed. Damon wasn't expecting that. Mark's got some power in those punches. He's adapting well to the advice he received. Daniel added, "Yes, and that right hook was a solid strike." Damon's been relying heavily on his kicks, but Mark's showing he's got some impressive boxing skills too. This fight is really heating up. Damon shook off the hit, refocusing as he continued to circle Mark. He threw a high kick, which Mark dodged but couldn't completely avoid. The kick landed on Mark's shoulder, and he winced but quickly moved. Mark responded with a number of punches, landing a solid combination to Damon's upper body. Damon ate the hits, his breath coming harder with each strike. Despite his attempts to dodge and counter, Mark's punches found their mark, showing his boxing prowess. Damon managed to respond with a sharp elbow to Mark's head, causing him to back off momentarily. The commentators continued, "Damon's showing some resilience here. He's taking a few heavy hits, and he's eating them up. It's impressive how he's managing to stay on his feet and fight through the pain." Michael added, "It's true, Daniel. Damon's tough, but Mark's skills are proving to be a real challenge. This round has been a good battle of endurance and strategy." Mark's punches were landing with increasing accuracy. He caught Damon with an uppercut, making Damon's head snap back again. Damon felt the sting of the blows but kept moving, his eyes locked on Mark as he tried to assess his opponent's weaknesses. Damon managed to land a quick low kick to Mark's thigh, making him momentarily slow down. But Mark didn't let up. He followed with rapid punches, forcing Damon to backpedal. The commentators were engrossed in the action. Michael Bosley spoke over the broadcast, "Damon's taking some heavy hits here. Mark's punches are landing with precision, and Damon's defenses are being tested." Daniel Green added, "Yes, but Damon's not backing down either. He's countering with those powerful kicks and knees, but I feel it's coming to a climax." Mark continued to press forward, throwing a combination of punches and attempting to close the distance. Despite the effective strikes from both fighters, Mark's determination was evident, the arrogance from the Farrat round gone. He charged at Damon, throwing a series of hard punches. With less than a minute left in the round, Mark executed a quick feint, making Damon react defensively. Mark then launched a powerful right hook that Damon failed to avoid. Seizing the moment, Mark grabbed Damon's legs and pulled them out from under him. Damon fell heavily to the canvas, and Mark followed up, trying to secure a dominant position. Damon struggled on the ground, attempting to escape from Mark's hold. Mark used his weight to maintain control, keeping Damon pinned and working to improve his position. Damon pushed against Mark, trying to get back to his feet, but Mark's wrestling background gave him an advantage in this situation. The crowd watched intently as Mark tried to solidify his control. Michael Bosley's voice came through the broadcast, "Mark Henderson with a successful takedown." Damon's been on the defensive for most of this round, and Mark's wrestling skills have finally come into play. Daniel Green added, "It's a crucial moment in the fight. Damon's got to find a way to get out from underneath Mark or risk losing the round." Chapter 56. Jaw Crusher. As the final round neared its end, Damon felt the weight of his situation. The knowledge of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu granted to him by the system was in his mind, but it wasn't like Muay Thai. BJJ needed a partner, someone to grapple with, to learn the nuances of every move. Muay Thai also needed a partner, but Damon had managed to train on his own, practicing kicks, elbows, and knees, repeating them over and over until they became second nature. But BJJ, that was a different beast. Without someone to train with, without real experience, he was stuck. The fight resumed, with Mark locking eyes on Damon, intent on finishing what he had started. Mark's corner had emphasized using his wrestling skills to dominate Damon on the ground, and now that he had Damon down, he wasn't about to let the opportunity slip away. Mark shifted his weight, trying to pass Damon's guard and move into a more dominant position. Damon struggled beneath him, trying to use his BJJ knowledge to create space and escape, but it was easier said than done. Mark's wrestling was solid, his control tight as he worked to maintain his advantage. Damon felt Mark's hands pushing against his chest, trying to pin him down further. Mark's body pressed down on him, making it hard to breathe. Damon knew he had to do something, and fast. The commentators were quick to notice the shift in momentum. "Mark is really asserting his dominance here," Michael Bosley commented. "You can see him using his weight and skills to keep Damon pinned down." Damon's groundwork knowledge seems to be non-existent, but Mark's experience is real, and it's showing. Daniel Green nodded. "Absolutely, Michael. Damon's in a tough spot right now. He's trying to find a way out, but Mark's not giving him any room to breathe." Mark tried to improve his position, but Damon was doing his best to keep him at bay. Despite his lack of practical BJJ experience, Damon had some understanding of what to do. Daniel added, "That's gotta hurt. Mark's struggling, but that pressure on his jaw could break something if he's not careful. Damon's using everything he has here." Damon's heart pounded in his chest as he held on for dear life. He knew this was his only chance. The pressure on Mark's jaw was increasing, and Damon could feel the strain on his own arms. His muscles burned, but he didn't let go. The thought of losing this fight, of everything slipping away, gave him the strength to keep going. Mark's struggles grew more desperate as the seconds ticked by. He tried to push Damon away, to free himself from the choke, but Damon's grip was unyielding. The pain in Mark's jaw was excruciating, and Damon could feel the tension building. It was a battle of wills, both fighters giving everything they had. "Mark's in serious trouble now," Michael said, his voice filled with tension. "If Damon can hold this just a little longer, Mark might be forced to tap before the bell rings." Daniel was equally invested. "You can see the desperation on Mark's face. He's in agony, and Damon's not letting up. This could be the end right here." And it was over. Mark's hand slapped against Damon's side, tapping out in submission. The pain in his jaw was too much, and he knew he couldn't continue. Damon felt the tap, and for a moment, he didn't realize what had happened. But then, it hit him. He had won. Mark had tapped out. The referee quickly stepped in, pulling them apart as the crowd erupted in cheers. Damon lay on the canvas, gasping for breath as the realization sank in. He had done it. Against all odds, he had managed to secure the win. The guillotine choke had been sloppy, far from perfect, but it had worked. Damon had survived, and more importantly, he had won. Mark rolled away, clutching his jaw, clearly in pain but also relieved that the fight was over. Damon sat up slowly, still trying to catch his breath. The crowd's cheers echoed in his ears, a mixture of disbelief and admiration for the gritty performance they had just witnessed. Chapter 57. Post-fight analysis. The commentators, Michael Bosley and Daniel Green, sat at their desk, microphones in hand, analyzing the fight that had just concluded. "Another win for Damon Cross," Michael said, his voice filled with excitement. "He's on a 2-win streak now. You can see he had the match under control in the first round." Daniel nodded in agreement. "Yes, and then he lost it in the second round. But he managed to turn the tables. I mean, a knockout and a submission in 2 matches in a row is impressive." Michael continued, "Damon's performance was remarkable. He showed great resilience and adaptability. He was able to adjust his strategy mid-fight and capitalize on Mark's mistakes." Daniel added, "I also noticed something amazing. I saw some knowledge of groundwork from Damon. He was able to use his body positioning and leverage to escape from bad positions. I'm sure if he had a good team behind him, he would be a force to be reckoned with." Michael chimed in, "Well, Daniel, if he keeps performing like this, I don't think he'll stay a loner for long. He's got a good head on his shoulders, and his skills are undeniable. He's definitely a fighter to watch out for in the future." The camera panned out, showing the commentators' desk, the crowd in the background, still cheering and chanting Damon's name. Michael and Daniel continued to analyze the fight, discussing Damon's strengths and weaknesses, and speculating about his future in the sport. Their voices were filled with enthusiasm and expertise, providing a detailed and insightful breakdown of the match. As they spoke, the camera cut to shots of Damon, still in the cage, being attended to by the medical staff. He was smiling, his eyes shining with pride and exhaustion. He had given it his all, and it had paid off. As the medical team finished their checks, they packed up their equipment and left the cage, giving the fighters space. Damon left the cage, the crowd's cheers still echoing in his ears. He couldn't help but smirk, feeling a sense of pride and accomplishment. As he walked out, he was met with a sea of faces, all congratulating him on his win. He nodded his head in appreciation, his eyes scanning the room for a quiet place to escape the chaos. He made his way through the crowded hallway, his footsteps quiet on the carpeted floor. He passed by staff members, who patted him on the back and offered words of encouragement. He also greeted fellow fighters, who nodded in respect and admiration. Finally, he arrived at the room assigned to him, a small sanctuary away from the noise and excitement. He closed the door behind him, feeling a sense of relief wash over him. He leaned back against the door, his eyes closing as he let out a deep sigh. What a night, he whispered to himself, his voice barely audible. I almost lost. He shook his head, remembering the moments when Mark had gained the upper hand. But he had persevered, using every ounce of skill and determination to turn the fight around. He pushed himself off the door and walked towards the table in the center of the room. He sat down, his body feeling heavy with exhaustion. He ran his hands through his hair, feeling the sweat and adrenaline still coursing through his veins. The room was quiet, the only sound the distant murmur of the crowd. Damon closed his eyes, savoring the peace and quiet. He took a deep breath, feeling his heart rate slow down, and his muscles relax. He knew he had a long night ahead of him, but for now, he just wanted to rest and enjoy the feeling of victory. Chapter 58, Gotcha Spin. The system suddenly dinged. Damon's eyes snapped towards the sound, and he opened the system interface. Quest COMPLETEDREWARD, 10 coins. He smiled, chuckling to himself. It felt good to complete a quest and get rewarded. But then, another ding sounded. Damon sat up, confusion etched on his face. He didn't have any quest completed. Was it a new one? He looked at the system interface again. 63, 50 matches complete. Achievement ACQUIREDREWARD. Lottery gotcha. Will you have 3 free spins? Damon's eyes widened. What was this? He didn't know what a gotcha wheel was, but it sounded interesting. He read on. Function: the lottery gotcha wheel is a wheel you spin. It can land in different sections, from elixir gear tech skillset random. Damon's eyes scanned the text. He still didn't understand what a gotcha wheel was, but he liked the sound of it. He stood up, a smile spreading across his face. This was amazing, but how does he get spins? As if listening to his thoughts, the system interface changed. Spins are gained in every fight. 1 win means 1 spin. 10 accumulated spins can be used for a mega spin. Damon's eyes lit up. Oh, so he gets spins for winning fights. And he can use them to spin the wheel. He felt a surge of excitement. This was going to be fun. He stood there, staring at the system interface, thinking of every possibility possible. Damon's face contorted in a mixture of shock, anger, and disbelief. His eyes bulged, and his mouth dropped open. This is a damn scam, he shouted, throwing his hands up in the air. His arms flailed wildly, as if trying to physically express his frustration. His fingers splayed, and his palms faced the ceiling. Damon's face reddened, and his voice echoed through the room. He took a step back, his eyes still fixed on the screen. The words, "Congratulations for winning nothing," seemed to mock him, their bright, cheerful tone a stark contrast to Damon's intense emotions. Damon's chest heaved, his breathing rapid and shallow. He felt like he'd been punched in the gut, his excitement and anticipation replaced by anger and disappointment. Damon's laughter echoed through the room, a deep, throaty sound. Ha 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 ha. He remembered he still had 2 more spins, and his anger dissipated. He removed the message, and the wheel reappeared. He spun again, and the wheel sprang to life. This time, Damon closed his eyes, his face relaxed. He heard the wheel spinning, a soft whirring sound. Then, he heard a click. Damon opened his eyes, and a bright message greeted him. Congratulations for winning gear. You have won a punching bag. At first, Damon's face fell. That's so damn use, he started to say, but then he paused. He looked at the reward again, and a slow smile spread across his face. Not useless, he said, his voice filled with excitement. This is good. Oh, I love you, System. He professed his love, his eyes shining with gratitude. Damon had been complaining about not having a partner to train with, but now he had something to hit. A punching bag. He could practice his punches, work on his technique. He felt a surge of joy, his heart filled with excitement. He couldn't wait to start using the punching bag, to feel the leather beneath his fists. Damon's face glowed with happiness, his smile stretching from ear to ear. He felt like he'd won the jackpot, like the system had finally given him something he truly needed. Damon's finger hovered over the screen, ready to spin the wheel again. But then, he caught himself. I should stop, he thought, his hand hesitating in midair. He looked at the wheel, its golden light gleaming enticingly. He was enjoying this, maybe a bit too much. He. The thrill of the unknown, the rush of excitement, it was all so captivating. But Damon knew he shouldn't get too carried away. He took a deep breath, his eyes narrowing slightly as he made a decision. Okay, I'll wait, he thought. He would wait maybe a day, then spin again, and capitalize on his daily luck. Damon smiled to himself, feeling a sense of control wash over him. He could do this, he could pace himself. Gambling was fun. Yippee. Chapter 59. Mistakes. Damon removed the interface, the golden light fading from his sight. He stretched his arms, feeling a sense of satisfaction wash over him. He had won a punching bag, and he couldn't wait to start training with it. Opening the shop, he browsed through the items, his eyes scanning the list. He stopped at the food section and selected a banana, purchasing it for 1 system coin. I have plenty, he thought, and I'm not going to stop getting more. He packed up his plastic bag, which had his normal clothes, and headed towards the locker room showers. The smell of sweat and soap filled the air as he entered the locker room. He put his stuff on the bench, his eyes adjusting to the bright lights. Damon walked into the shower, the warm water enveloping him. He let out a sigh, feeling the tension in his muscles ease. He grabbed the soap and started washing himself, the suds sliding down his skin. The water pounded against his skin, a steady beat that seemed to wash away his worries. Damon closed his eyes, letting the warmth seep into his bones. He stood there for a moment, savoring the feeling of relaxation. As he washed, Damon thought about his next move. He had the punching bag, and he was eager to start training. He would have to find a good spot to set it up, maybe the parking lot, but he would have to take it back in the room. If he wanted still have something to train with, who knew what those crackhead would do for drug money? As the warm water flowed down his body, Damon's mind began to wander to his past fights. He thought about the mistakes he had made, the opportunities he had missed, and the weaknesses he had exposed. He wasn't perfect, far from it. He was unskilled, and he knew it. Even with the system, he still had to hone himself so he wouldn't even dare call himself a real fighter until he won in a way he felt satisfied by it. Damon's thoughts lingered on his fight today and the one before it. He had wanted to ignore going to the ground, to avoid it at all costs, but he knew he couldn't ignore it forever. His Brazilian jiu-jitsu skills were limited to knowledge, not practical experience. Damon nodded, feeling a sense of connection with Edward. Yeah, that's me, he said, his voice deep and smooth. Thanks, man, I was lucky to get the submission. Edward grinned, his teeth white and even. Lucky? Nah, you were skilled, man. I saw the whole thing. You've got some serious talent. Damon shrugged, feeling a sense of pride. Thanks, I try my best. As they talked, Damon noticed the sound of lockers opening and closing. Seems people were coming in. Edward nodded, his eyes serious. Yeah, I know what you mean. I'm trying my luck too. I don't exactly have a team or coach yet. Maybe we'll see each other around. Damon's eyes widened at the coincidence. I'm Damon, by the way. Edward, but my friends call me Eddie, the guy said, his smile still plastered on his face. Anyway, Eddie, I gotta bounce, Damon said, nodding. I can't stay long. I'll probably see you next event. Need to rest and recover, then back to training. As they parted ways, Damon felt a sense of connection with Edward. They were both fighters, both alone in this competition. Damon continued dressing, his movements slow and deliberate. He pulled on his shirt, feeling the soft fabric slide over his skin. His jeans were next. He laced up his shoes, then stomped them on the ground. He grabbed his plastic, slinging it over his shoulder, and headed out of the locker room. As Damon walked out of the building, the guards gave him a friendly pat down, then nodded and let him pass. Walking across the parking lot, he reached into his bag and pulled out a banana. He peeled it with a quick flick of his wrist, then took a bite, and he chewed contentedly. As he walked, he spotted a trash can and tossed the banana peel into it. He continued on, his eyes scanning the street for a cab. After a few minutes of walking, he spotted a taxi and hailed it. The driver pulled over, and Damon got in, giving him the address of his hotel. As the cab drove off, Damon settled back into the seat, feeling a sense of exhaustion wash over him. He closed his eyes, letting the motion of the car put him into a state of relaxation. Chapter 60. Drive home, and we're almost here. The driver's voice woke Damon up from his sleep. Damon yawned, stretching his arms over his head, feeling the familiar ache in his muscles. "Thank you," he said, his voice still husky from sleep. The driver chuckled, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "You a fighter?" he asked, his gaze flicking to Damon's face with a hint of amusement. Damon sat up straight, nodding sheepishly. "Yeah, I fight. It's just amateur, but I'm pretty sure I'm getting paid in bruises." The driver laughed, a deep rumbling sound. "Well, you're definitely getting paid in bruises. I mean, I've seen some rough faces in my time, but yours takes the cake." Damon laughed, feeling a sense of familiarity with the driver. "Hey, at least I'm consistent, right?" The driver grinned. "That you are, kid. That you are. So, how did you get into fighting?" Damon shrugged. "Just something I've always been interested in, I guess. And I've got a lot of anger to work out." Mixing truths and lies, Damon's curiosity got the better of him. "How did you know I fight? Besides my face, of course," he asked, his eyes narrowing slightly. The driver's gaze remained fixed on the road ahead. "Well, for starters, I know of the event you fight in," he said, his voice low and smooth. Damon raised an eyebrow. "You a fan?" he asked, a hint of amusement in his voice. The driver let out a deep laugh. "Was, but no. My kid fights there," he said, his voice filled with pride, but also a tinge of sadness. The driver's expression turned skeptical. "Kid, I know you're young, but who in their right mind would give such offers for free? I think they're just trying to make young fighters fight harder so they get good shows for their events." The driver's words hung in the air, a mix of concern and suspicion. Damon's mind was racing, thinking about the offer he had received. Was it too good to be true? The taxi continued to roll down the streets, the only sound the sound of the engine and the driver's occasional cough. Damon's eyes gazed out the window, lost in thought. The driver's voice broke the silence. "I just don't want my kid to get hurt, that's all. I know he's passionate about fighting, but I also know he's not thinking clearly." Damon nodded sympathetically, his mind still racing with thoughts of the offer. Was it a scam, or was it the real deal? He didn't know, and honestly, he didn't care, as long as he fights. The ride was silent for the rest of the way, the only sound being the sound of the engine and the occasional passing of cars. Finally, the driver spoke up. "We're finally here, kid." The taxi pulled up to the motel, the neon sign creaking in the gentle breeze. Damon got out, stretching his arms over his head. "Thanks for the ride," he said, his voice sincere. He took out his wallet and paid the fare, adding a generous tip. "Also, I hope things look up for you," he said, his eyes locking onto the driver's. "Get well soon." The driver smiled, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "Thanks, kid. Take care of yourself." With that, the driver put the car in gear and drove off, leaving Damon standing alone in front of the motel. Damon stood there for a moment, lost in thought. He couldn't help but wonder what he would do if his mother had cancer. Would he be like that man's son, fighting to make ends meet and trying to stay positive? Damon's eyes gazed off into the distance, his mind racing with thoughts of his own family. He shook his head, clearing his thoughts. He took a deep breath, feeling the cool night air fill his lungs. He looked up at the motel, the neon sign casting a colorful glow over the parking lot. Support the original author by checking out their book, links in the description.